Hey, you guys. All right. It is time for my Tuesday Live at 5. I'm Jodi Carlton. If you're new to me, I'm a neurodiversity expert and relationship coach. Some of you still call it Asperger's or autism. I work with adults, those of you in relationships, and so many of you who are singles and dating have been asking me to work with you too. And I have in the past in my counseling world. When I had a traditional counseling practice, I've worked with singles a lot. But I've opened up my calendar, you guys. So you are able to, let me see if I can turn this on. You are able to book a consultation with me and then do private coaching with me if you're single. I'm not just working with couples right now. I've been working hard this whole beginning of this year to redesign some of my programs and my coaching so that I can be accessible to everybody who wants to work with me. So that's really cool. I also, let's see, I want to show you how to do that. My assistant, you guys, is on vacation this week, so I'm doing this all by myself today. And for that reason, I'm not streaming to Facebook. I just could not bite off all of that all by myself. So let's see if I can actually do this. Yes. Okay. Let me turn that off. I don't know how to turn that off. There. So this is how you guys can actually book a consultation with me. So you just go to my website, which is spectrumrelationships.com, and you just click on the book a private consultation tab, and this just gives you a little bit of information. And there are 3 different types of consultations that you can actually book with me. And just come on down here, pick the one you want. Let's say you want the comprehensive, and you just pick yourself a time and just keep on going. So that's how you do all that. But I also wanted to show you guys, I wanted to announce to you so some of you are already familiar with my communication program, and it used to be called Communication Transformation, but I have branded this program into a 5-step program. I'm so excited about this, and it's called Crack the Communication Code. And so it's 5 steps, and some of you have already been through some of these steps. So we've got step 1, which is our battle buster. This is free, you guys. This is what I used to call my 2 or 10 conflict management system. You get it free here. Then you've got a webinar that starts with conflict. So we have to minimize the conflict first. I tell folks this all the time when they're working with me for private coaching. We have to minimize the conflict first. And then the 4-stage communication hack. This is formerly my communication transformation self-study. So this one's locked. You got to go through these 2 first. This is free. This is 25 bucks. This one's 225, and it's a multi-module video-based slide. You got slides, you got a handbook, you got not videos, but audio downloads, so you can listen to it in your car or wherever. And then step 4, this is where you get on the live coaching group with me. Once you've been through the first 3 steps, you actually get onto it, you enroll in a live coaching group. And then step 5 is free for life, where you basically have access to this program and to the coaching group for life to keep, basically to maintain what you've learned. So between the communication program and the private coaching options, I've got it all here for you guys. So, all right. Let me turn this back on. So we've got a bunch of questions today that have already been submitted to me. You guys emailed them to me. And so let's see, I'm getting an error message, so I hope you guys can see me. So we're going to be going through those, but I also want you to, I'm keeping an eye on my comments over here. And so say hi to me if you're here. I want to know who's here. Let's see. Uh-oh, it says my chat has been disconnected. So I'm going to just pull up YouTube, pull up my channel so that I make sure I see your comments. Technology's great. And of course, this is going to happen on the day that my assistant is not here to produce this for me. So, okay. Hi, Eggman. I got your question ready to go. Um, okay. Hi, Nathan. Good to see you. Um, all right. So, let's see. I'm just going to call you AK. Good to see you here. And you're wondering why Aspie partners, uh, who are very intelligent, I think you're asking me, sometimes approach some situations as if they're lacking rational thinking. Well, since you're going to have to leave, I will go ahead and answer your question first. And then we'll get into the other questions that have been submitted. Hi, Leanne and Lee. Good to see you guys. So, all right, you're asking me, I wonder why Aspie partners who are very intelligent sometimes approach some situations as if they were lacking rational thinking. Okay, so yes, lots of folks on the spectrum are super intelligent, but just so you know, trivial fact here, the intelligence, like average intelligence, it's really no different than the average population. Sometimes we tend to think that folks on the spectrum are these, really brilliant people, and some absolutely are. But so are neurotypical folks, and it's the IQs in the Asperger's population and the general population are pretty much the same. But so to answer your question, why is it that someone who is really, really intelligent struggles with rational thinking? And so I'm going to reword the way you said that to what sometimes seems like common sense. Rational thinking, like what's reasonable, what's rational. And the reason for this, and if those of you who are on the spectrum want to pipe in here, hey Beverly, good to see you. The reason for this is the way that the autistic brain tends to work can be very linear. In other words, it's this, then this, then this, then this, and it sometimes fails to notice other variables. So if you think of a decision tree, the neurotypical brain might start at the top with a question and then it branches out like a tree. So it's like, if this, then this, and you'll go over to this arm or branch of the tree. If this, then this, go over to this branch of the tree. So there are all these different options, all these different variables, all these different routes that the brain can take to solve a problem or think or go about a task. It's like literally like a tree that branches. Whereas, so that's how a neurotypical brain goes about problem solving. An autistic brain oftentimes either just it's like going down the trunk of the tree, like this, then this, then this, or there aren't as many branches. The autistic brain sometimes doesn't pull in all those different variables. So it can really look like the behavior or the action is not rational or that it doesn't make sense. Whereas for someone on the spectrum, it makes perfect sense. There's this, then this, then this. And it would be usually the way decisions are made are rational and logical to that vertical, to their train of thought, their the way that they're thinking about it. But to someone else looking in, might see all these other possible options that are being included in that decision or that thought process. So the intelligence really doesn't it isn't related to how we task, how we go. This is called executive functioning. So that's a big fancy word. When you break it down, executive functioning means how we execute a task or how we go about a specific sequence of events or a decision process. And so some folks on the spectrum, well, to some degree, pretty much everybody has a certain amount of struggle with executive functioning. So the this, then this, the sequencing can seem it can seem to not make sense to a neurotypical, whereas the way we make decisions, we being neurotypical, may not make sense to our partner because their sequence of that linear coming down the tree trunk uh, isn't going to necessarily make sense the way we would go about making that decision. So it's just really goes back to the brains. Our brains are wired differently. So another analogy might be if we're going from point A to point B in our car. If I'm going from my town to another town, I might see all the alternative routes, whereas someone on the spectrum may just see the one route to get there. So it may be that that route has a lot of traffic on it, and it doesn't make sense to me to go that way, but that's the way that the person on the spectrum sees to go. All right. Hi, Clara. Good to see you here too. Okay. So I hope that was helpful. If anybody, again, if you guys, any of you who are here on the spectrum want to weigh in on any of that, please do. All right, Eggman, since you're here, I'm going to start. Also, I'm going to go to your question next. And let me see if I can find it here. Okay. So you said that you're a school teacher and you use this alias online because you don't want your students or parents seeing your comments, and I totally understand that. So you're saying you're single and you have been telling women right away that you're autistic. You say, I can see that flirty look. Sorry, you guys, I'm losing my voice already. And I just started. I can see that flirty look fade from their face to a see you later expression. Should I be telling them right away, or should I let things develop and then tell them? I feel like I should be upfront about it. But now that I'm being upfront, this cracks me up. You're not even getting. So he says I'm not even getting a couple of weeks of date sex. I chuckled when I read that. Okay, you're telling them too soon. Here's the thing. So many people don't know what autism is. They don't know what Asperger's is. They don't know that Asperger's is what we used to call high functioning autism now. They've heard, some of you maybe haven't even heard the word neurodiversity. I'm looking at your decision. Okay. And so it's something that when you put that out there too soon, without giving them the opportunity to really get to know you, it can be alarming because people have different impressions of what that means. It may be that they've watched a TV show. They may think that you're Sheldon from Big Bang Theory. And so, of course, we all know that Sheldon is a stereotype that's very exaggerated, and that folks on the spectrum will have parts of those features, but not others. Or, their exposure to autism might have been a friend who had an autistic child that was really, really struggling. So when you tell a woman that you're dating really soon that you're autistic, that really may just be like, whoa, whatever their impression is of that is going to cloud whatever connection they already have with you. So give it time. It's not something that you have to just lead. That's a very personal thing to share with somebody. So if you have a connection with someone, get to know them, let them get to know you, and then if the relationship, if it looks like you're going to actually have if you're interested in a relationship and she's interested in going to continue to date, then it's something that you might even bring up, or you might even start by saying, so what do you know about Asperger's and autism? Just curious. You might want to find out if they've known anybody with autism, right? Just kind of bring it up in conversation to see how much they know already, what their opinions and perspective of it is already. And then you can say, well, guess what? I'm on the spectrum too. But you want to give them time to get to know who you are and to see that they have that you have, they can have this dating relationship with you. I see my comments blowing up over here. Let's see. Let me bring this over here where I can see it more easily, you guys, because I don't want to miss any comments. Okay, yeah. So Claire's saying people don't know. You're saying you've seen people be surprised when you tell them. Um, Nathan, so you're saying you're the stereotype of everyone loves Raymond. Yeah, I think you were the first person who actually pointed out to me that Raymond was probably on the spectrum, and it makes so much sense now that I know that. Um, right. So not all of us are the engineering type. Some of us are actually weak in visual spatial skills. And I say quantum contact with McKenna. Hi again. I remember you from last week. You said I get tired of people thinking I'm busy making stuff up as a response when I'm really just looking at possible outcomes, probability, and eliminating options and what verbiage will be used. Okay, so I think you're referring back to the first question. So you're saying that people think you're just making stuff up, but really you're actually really analyzing those different outcomes. You're looking at that decision tree and looking at all the different possibilities. But it sounds like the people in your world um, aren't realizing that that's what's going on in your mind. And sometimes when there's a longer pause, when that processing is happening, people fill in the gap. They fill in what they think is happening, and there can be total misunderstanding there. That's what the communication curriculum is all about, is learning how to minimize those misunderstandings that happen between neurotypical and neurodiverse partners, and or really even we have a question today about, can two folks on the spectrum be in a relationship, and we're about to get to that. Okay, Eggman, I want to hear a full report in a few weeks about how it goes when you try this new response. So I expect to hear back from you. Clara's saying, who's the Aspie on every? It's Raymond. Raymond is the Aspie, is what my understanding is. Um, okay. All right. Let me make sure I've. All right. So you guys are commiserating. All right. I'm going to go to my next question. All right. So this person is saying, do people with high functioning autism, do their idiosyncrasies, their quirks, differences, increase or get more pronounced over time? So she says, my husband is 63 and his ways seem to be more pronounced. And over time, like having a conversation, his response is getting slower. She says his personality has changed a lot, doing things he never did in the 14 years they've been together. She says, I understand the masking, but 14 years with one personality, and then it's like that person disappeared. So much so that she thought he was actually having some mini strokes. So she said she doesn't really know what to trust, and to trust if what he's saying is if he can be responsible with the relationship or finances, that he really liked that she took over the finances. So basically, you're asking me if the traits and characteristics of autism can become more exaggerated over time. So the first thing I want to say is yes, but this is true for all of us, not just autism. So whatever our quirks are, whatever personality traits we have, those things tend to come out more and more over time. And you mentioned masking. Think about this for a second. Do you guys know, I'm not going to pick on senior citizens, but it's kind of a cliche that, grumpy old men or grumpy old ladies, not that all old people are grumpy, but what we kind of know about senior citizens is that over time, they kind of just don't really care nearly as much about the masking that we all do. They don't care near as we age, as we get older. It's pretty common that we just kind of our core personality comes out more and more, and we all may have even had the grandparent or somebody that just called it the way she saw it or he saw it, and you're like, oh man, no. And it's as we age, we just we've stopped filtering nearly as much. And so it's the same for folks on the spectrum as it is for neurotypical folks. And so part of that has to do with just overall fatigue over time. The masking is exhausting, and it's socially exhausting. It's tiring in our relationship, and we just lose the ability, the desire, the motivation, and the just not even wanting to. So yes, the answer to your question is yes. Now, the other thing I do want to say, your this person who asked this question is saying that she feels like she has a different personality, that her partner, her husband, is a totally different personality, and that you're concerned that he may have even been having many strokes. So the other piece of this is we do have to look at other variables too: medical, hormonal, biological. There are a lot of reasons why our personality can change, um, our neurology can change, our processing can change, and so it is important to pay attention that if someone's personality or uh, if there's ever any significant change that seems to happen fast versus kind of slowly over time, just that seems to be part of just we're getting older and grumpy or whatever. That's something to be pursued and to follow up with a medical doctor first. When I was back in the counseling space, when I was a traditional counselor for about 20 years, when people came to me and something had really significantly changed, let's say their anxiety levels were just through the roof, or they're having physiological symptoms like memory issues, or just quick trigger anger responses that was kind of explosive. If there was nothing that we knew for sure, like there was no traumatic event um, that precipitated all of that, I would never diagnose someone with anything: depression, anxiety disorder, bipolar disorder, which is, not just being moody. It's about swinging from one end of a spectrum to another. It's another spectrum until that person was evaluated medically. And I learned this in my own training because back in the years ago, my original expertise and training was in neuropsychology, and I worked with folks who'd had acquired and traumatic brain injuries. So I did work with people who'd had strokes or brain tumors or bangs on the head. And there are lots of things that are indicators that something's going on biologically or physically or medically. So I'm not trying to scare you, the person who's asking this question, but I do want all of you to be aware that when there's any significant change in personality or memory or thought processes or anything like that that seems kind of sudden, it's worth having it checked out by a physician. That said, our quirks, all of that does seem to become more and more exaggerated, or not exaggerated, but we tend to kind of those traits become bigger and bigger and more obvious over time. All right, are you guys talking to me still? I don't see any new comments. Okay, let me go on to my next question. I think you guys, let me just check. Okay. Seinfeld, Claire's saying Seinfeld's an Aspie too. Yeah, I can see that. All right. Somebody say hello. Am I still streaming? Am I good? Okay. I think I'm good. All right. So my next question, here's my nose. You guys know my nose starts itching every time I start talking. All right. This next person who emailed, and by the way, if you want to submit a question anonymously, let me just put this in the chat real quick. Just send it to us at support@spectrumrelationships.com. Hi, Melissa. Okay, thanks for saying hi. Okay, so this next person says, I've been with my husband for 21 years, and he has all the traits of Asperger's and ADHD. A lot of times, you guys, ADHD is what looks like ADHD is part of that neurodiverse umbrella. He's a hoarder of everything in our house, he's a hoarder, and our house is getting smaller and smaller. He's a music teacher with many hobbies like woodwind instruments, horse riding, painting. He also loves DIY, like do it yourself stuff, and has all the tools for everything, but nothing in 17 years within the house is fully completed. He has unopened mail or post for over 21 years, and there are crates and piles everywhere. She says, I've shifted his stuff into his own room, but he never declutters. And we have a loft full of stuff. So, and she goes on and on and on and to talk about how much stuff there is, and that she's made lists for him and reminders, but nothing changes. But the last thing she says is what really jumps out at me. She says, he says he works long hours and doesn't get time and to leave his things alone. It really is a deal breaker for me and my 2 children. What can you suggest, please? Okay. So the last 2 sentences are a pretty big deal. She says, I've done to-do lists for him and reminders, but nothing changes. Okay, first of all, this is his stuff, and it is his job to keep it cleaned up or to hoard if that's what he wants to do. The last thing you said, though, is it really is a deal breaker for me and my 2 children. So, if for those of you who have accessed my 2 or 10 model, which is now called the Battle Buster system, I'm just going to tell you guys about what that is. For those of you who aren't familiar, this is the first step 1 in the crack the code, crack the communication code. And basically, I teach people to evaluate how big something is. Is it a deal breaker? Is it not? By using 2 questions, and one is, how important is this to me? And number 2, how much is it impacting my life? And we rate this on a scale between 2 and 10. And I say it's not 0. And my Aspies sometimes don't like that. But the reason I don't use 0 to 10 is because nothing's really ever a 0. It's either a 1 or a 2. 10 is like a deal breaker. So when we ask ourselves, how important is this to me? We rate it from 2 to 10, 10 being a deal breaker, 2 being it's no big deal. It doesn't bother me at all. And how much is this impacting my life? What I'm hearing this person say, she actually uses the word deal breaker. This is a deal breaker for myself and my children. So I want you to truly ask yourself, if you are the person who submitted this question, to think about what does deal breaker mean for you, because we need to define that term as well. Deal breaker means I literally cannot live this way. So how important is this to me is either I have to have this in my life, or I absolutely cannot have this in my life. This is an absolute, okay? I have to have it or I cannot have it. How much is this impacting my life is tremendously. It's destroying my life. It's completely destructive to me, or it doesn't bother me at all. And if the answer to either one of those questions is a 10, then you have a major problem. You have a major problem, and you are in a relationship that is eventually going to fail, whether it fails now or it fails down the road. And failure can look a lot of different ways. It can look like divorce or separation, or it can look like still being married but completely living separate lives. Now, in this situation, this person is living with someone who hoards. So this is a special interest. Okay, he's got special interests, and he hoards. He likes to hold on to things and not let them go. So it's not about changing him, because he's going to be who he is. He's the only one who can decide that he wants to change, and I'm not hearing that he wants to. He likes having his stuff. It's not problematic to him. This is a very tough thing to go when it's your husband. And she says 21 years, that's a long time, you guys. But this is your life. And if you truly cannot live this way, you do get to walk away. You do get to. But you also said you'd made lists for him and reminders. The thing is, he doesn't want to change this. I see my comment feed blowing up over here. So Nathan is saying, let's see what you guys are saying. Autistic musicians unite. Nathan says, I do think the lists are good. I wonder if he'd be open to a professional organizer who could help him keep a few important things that he used in last year. Hoarding sometimes can be where you don't prioritize what's important. Since this is a 10, it seems important that a pro be called in. See, that's you said, but if he's not receptive, this is a problem. And that's the key. I've worked with folks on the spectrum who were hoarders, and they recognize, the folks that I've worked with have come to me and said, this is a problem for me. I hoard. I don't know how to not hoard. It's a problem. I don't want this. Okay, remember when I said last week or some live I was on recently that it takes ability, motivation, and willingness to change a relationship, for a relationship to work. It's the same for any kind of change. We have to have ability, motivation, and willingness. And for him, if he is not willing, if this is something that he wants to do, then he bringing a professional in still isn't going to fix it. I'm a professional. I can work with people, but I look for, when people come to me for private coaching, I look for that willingness. Are you actually willing to be here? Do you want to be here? Do you recognize that there's a problem that you want to change in your relationship? Or when I was still in the counseling world, are you here? Now, if you're here, I used to have people come to me for counseling that they just wanted to vent and bleh, all the problems they had, but they never, and I would work with them about solutions, and they're like, man, I just want to come in here and complain about everything. And I would fire them as a client. I actually fired people when I was a counselor, and I'll do the same thing as a coach, because I'm not going to take anybody's money just to complain about their life. They can go do that with a buddy. So if your partner is not willing to change this, now, a lot of folks say, we're married and my partner should love me enough to change for me. Okay, so this is where we all have autonomy in a relationship. We get to choose what's important enough to us to change. So we can make a bid. We can ask our partner. We can say, hey, this is bothersome to me. This is a problem for me. This is something I really need in a relationship. All we can do is ask. All we can do is put it out there, make it really clear to our partner what it is we need. We can go into the why, but sometimes the why is not really relevant. It's not even that important. Sometimes it's the what. But then our partner gets to decide if they're going to honor that or not. And we can even tell them, look, if this is something that you absolutely don't ever want to change, I'm going to have to make, this is the choice I'm going to have to make. And we let them know what our request is and what we will need to do. And that's not a threat. That's just that's just saying this is this is what I have to do based on what your decision is. And then we're giving them a choice. And if they choose not to honor our request and it is truly a deal breaker, then it's time to start looking at how to leave the relationship. And that sounds kind of black and white, but it really is. Let's see. Eggman's saying, sometimes I'll have an old envelope or piece of garbage that I don't know what to do with and leave it until I figured it out. Not messy, just can't decide. Yeah, see, that goes back to our executive functioning. It's there. So many folks on the spectrum especially will not take action when the action to take isn't really clear. So it's very hard sometimes for even neurotypical folks can struggle with this when we're faced with a choice and our options are not really clear to us. We can just choose to do nothing. This is a human trait. But those of you on the spectrum struggle even more with this when the options aren't really clear. And so you're saying, it may be an old envelope or a piece of garbage. You're saying, I don't know what to do with it, so I just do nothing. Or maybe the the options that you have, do I recycle this? Is this, is this a recyclable material or not? It's hard to make that choice. Um, oh gosh, lots and lots of comments. Let's see. Nathan is saying, it's the lack of a list that would make it so hard to know what to get rid of. So, those lists can be helpful, but again, it's got to be something that he wants to do. Hoarding can get ugly very quickly. Yes. You're saying I would love someone to sit with me and help organize everything. See, there's the willingness. That piece. Now, to this person who asked the question, if her partner, if her husband is saying, I know this is a problem and I don't like it and I want help, it may be that getting her lists, her help might feel sort of threatening to him. It may feel like a judgment from her or a criticism from her. Sometimes it's hard for all of us, for our partner to be the one that helps us, but we can accept help from a professional. You guys come to me all the time where a partner's figured out a lot about autism, and you come to me and the neurotypical partner's like, I've been reading all these books and I know exactly what needs to happen. And neurodiverse partner's like, I don't want to hear any of that from her or from him, because it feels judgy and it feels critical coming from our partner. But when I, the professional, am like, okay, let's talk about this, then they're able to hear it from me because I'm not judging and there's no like personal attachment to me. So if this woman's husband actually sees this hoarding as a problem, like you were saying, Eggman, you'd love for somebody to help you. If he's like, yeah, it's a problem, then a professional, yeah, get a professional in there, somebody to help. Okay, Melissa's like, it could just be a flashpoint for that. I think that's what you meant. Oh, Nathan, thank you. Nathan says, some of us might be slow to change, like an ability, yes, but have the willingness and motivation, or might have the ability but struggle to have the motivation. Yeah, this is so true. It's not all or nothing. We don't have the ability or not have it, have the motivation or not have it. I'm motivated differently on every day of the week. I started working out at the gym like 3 weeks ago, and today I was a whole lot less motivated to go than I was the other day. But it's still there. The motivation is still there. And the ability can actually change as well. So this is not something that's, set in stone. Our abilities to do things, our motivation and our willingness, it changes. Hey, Wendy, good to see you here. Wendy said when there's an emotional connection to the things, it gets difficult. It's especially hard for someone who struggles to connect with people. Yeah, so that's a really good point. So sometimes for folks who are on the spectrum who struggle to connect with people, the connection becomes to objects or things. Those special interests are so important and so valuable to folks. So it's hard to let go of those things. That was a really good point. All right. McKenna's like, if he loves you and comes home at night, all good. Yeah, that's a part of it. He does love you and come home at night. But there's a lot more to a relationship really being able to last. Love only gets us so far. I mean, some people can really love each other a lot and still not be able to be in a relationship with each other, not be aligned, and not have what it takes. Love is not going to get us where we need to be. Hi, 8888. You said, how do you get out of feeling resentful as an NT? My Aspie husband is not working, and I work to bring in money. Because of executive functioning and chores and daily tasks, you said because of executive functioning, chores and daily tasks take hours for him. So when the kids come home from school or daycare, I do all the time-sensitive chores so the kids are fed and get to bed on time. I feel like a single mom. I also feel like the resentment is so strong. I can't see a future for us. So, how does one get out of feeling like this? So, wow, I'm hearing so much overwhelm for you. And so, I think it's really critical in this situation to figure out what he can do and what he is able to do, to break down some of those tasks that you are doing into pieces, into smaller parts that he can do. And it's also important to ask yourself if some of the things that you are doing um, can be done in a way that you're okay with it not being quite the way you're used to it being done, or not quite up to your standard. And the reason I say that is a lot of neurotypical partners, especially, well, I say especially women, but it's true for men too. We have the way that we want things to be done, and those of you who are neurodiverse are the same. We have ways that we want things to be done. It makes sense to us. And we have our standards. We have our standards for how things should be done with the kids, maybe meals. I was working with a couple one time, and he was the neurodiverse one, and she was the neurotypical, and she was saying, "I have to make all the meals. He can't even just prepare the meals for our kids." And so we started talking. I was like, "Well, what kind of meals?" I said, "Can he not, slap together peanut butter and jelly?" And she's like, "Oh, well, yeah, he could do that, but it's really important to me that they have wholesome, nutritious foods." And while I absolutely support that, it's fine. But we realized that her standard, her expectations, and her values for how she wanted to take care of her children were actually rooted for her in some former history from her own growing up, where uh, she didn't get food. Her family was poor, and her parents weren't able. Her mom was not able to fix nutritious meals, and so for her, it was really important for her children to have these nutritious meals. But she was so invested in making sure that those meals were nutritious all the time that she was unable to just kind of back off and say, okay, 2 or 3 days a week, if he can fix them a can of SpaghettiOs, they're going to be fine. They're getting fed. So, what I'd encourage you to do is stop and look at what your standards are for how the kids are taken care of, how the chores are completed, how much is just necessary and sufficient versus optimal. Because sometimes what we believe is our baseline for how things, how clean something should be, really it's more of an optimal. It's the it's the wish list. I would love for my house to be clean all the time, but if it's just clutter free, that's better than, nothing. So just take a look at those things, break them down into really specific pieces and parts to figure out what he can do. And lastly, when he is the one to do them, it's the same. Okay, think about your husband is not a child, but when we ask, it's similar. Not that he's a child, but it's a similar concept. When we ask our children to do tasks and chores, when they're learning how, and even after they've learned how, we have to give them some space to do it in a way that's different from the way we would do it. And we have to give them some space to not do it exactly right. Um, my son takes out the garbage, and he will forget one of the trash cans every time. But he's taking the garbage out. He's doing it. He got 95%. And it drives me nuts that he didn't get the last 5%. But if I got on him about that last 5%, why didn't you get that? Then he would really lose motivation. It's similar with our partner. If we're, if our partner's doing some task that we used to do, and they don't quite do it to the extent or standard that we really just sometimes need to chill. As long as there's not a safety issue, a safety or negligence issue when it comes to your children, then relax and enjoy that it's you're not having to do it. Okay. All right. And you were asking me, how does one get out of feeling this way? I think the resentment's going to decrease if you can find more of, more things that he can do, and and if you'll try to implement what I just said, then you won't have as much on you. You're very overwhelmed. And the less that you have on you and the more you see him actually doing. And one more thing about that is a lot of folks on the spectrum, if they believe that the way they do, if you've asked them to do a task and they believe that however they do it is going to get judged and criticized, they're going, and this is true for everybody really, not just folks on the spectrum. But if there's any hint that, or if there's any, if in the past he's done something you've asked him to do, and then you he didn't do it up to your standards. And I'm not trying to blame you for all this. It may be that your husband's just not willing to do this stuff. But if there's ever been any kind of criticism of the way he did it, then he's not going to want to do it again. Um, so all of those dynamics usually play a role in when couples try to divvy up tasks. So try it and report back to me next week how it went. Okay. Nathan says, I love your posts. Let's see. You said I have a lot of sorrow too. Yeah, I know, Nathan. I'm not sure who you're talking to, me or anyway. Um, so Eggman, you're saying not knowing what to do in what order is a huge problem for me. That's the sequencing, the task. That's executive functioning. And you just said in what order. That's sequencing. So step one, step two. What you just said is this is a big deal for folks on the spectrum. So neurotypical folks, we automatically lump together step one, two, and three, that we don't even realize that there are steps one, two, and three. We just lump that all into one step. Whereas those of you on the spectrum, you see those minor steps more broken down. So neurotypical folks can be like, what, what is the big deal? It's this, and this. And so, but really there are little micro steps. And that's something that a lot of folks on the spectrum struggle with. You are absolutely among many. Um, you're saying I teach, everything is in order. I play golf, 1, 2, 3. Yep, yep. Melissa says, sorry, can't wait to hear what Jodi says. All right. Yes, expectations will get you every time. But self-care and support for yourself are so important. Put your oxygen on first. I say this all the time. Yes, like when you fly. Those of you who have never flown, they do this little safety orientation video when you first are about to take off, and they always say if the cabin pressure changes, the little oxygen masks will fall down. And if you are traveling with a small child, you are to put your own on first before you put it on your child. Because if you run out of air, you will be of no assistance to your child. And it is true in your relationships. We have to self-care. We have to take care of ourselves before we have to. Because and so many people are like, no, I can't. And I'm guilty, you guys. I'm guilty. I don't take care of myself sometimes when I need to. But we can't be there for our people if we're not taking care of ourselves. McKenna says an interesting future topic might be how female Aspies are judged very harshly in relationships and by society in general if they don't meet expectations. I would like to hear more about what you mean by that, because I think females in general are judged very harshly in relationships and by society. So Aspies would absolutely be a part of that. Um, and of course, having Asperger's puts a whole other layer on what is expected from women in relationships. So if you could actually email me more about what you want to say about that, and that does sound like a good topic. Eggman says, again, a pretty girl telling me how to do things. There you go. There you go. There's a spin for you when you're dating. When you do finally reveal that you're Asperger's, just tell her she gets to tell you what to do. It's great. Women would be like, sweet. You got it figured out there. All right, Melissa says, yes, RE dinner issues. One thing that worked for our family was to do meal boxes like HelloFresh, yeah, Blue Apron, Home Chef. It allows my neurodiverse to participate in making dinner. It's all sequenced out for him in order. Yeah, I've done those before, and I learned a lot about cooking myself. Yeah, those can be really cool because the portions are already done for you. The ingredients are right there. They can be a little pricey, but if you can afford it, those are great. I've actually known several folks on the spectrum who've used those and really loved them. So that's thanks for bringing that up. That was a great tip. Okay, I still have a couple more questions that were emailed, you guys. So let me get to those. And it looks like we're going to go over an hour, but I'm good for that if you guys are good for that. So somebody says, can two Aspies make a relationship work? I'm starting to think I'm also an Aspie, and some of the traits for girls seem opposite to those for males with Asperger's. Okay, that's kind of two questions. Yes, two Aspies. I've had private coaching clients that both are on the spectrum, and sometimes they come to me thinking it's one of them, usually a man. Um, and then I've realized that the wife is on the spectrum too. I've got in my Facebook group, I've got women who are couples and men who are couples that are both on the spectrum. Because here again, it's a spectrum. And so every single person on the spectrum has a different set of spectrum traits. The common theme is the neurodiversity itself, the way that the brain actually processes information, tasks, sensory information differently. But for one person, they may be oversensitive to certain things, to certain sensations like smell, touch, taste, whatever. The other person may be under sensitive. One may have certain degree of social skills where the other one's a different set of social skills challenges. But, you know, ultimately we're all human beings and Aspies can absolutely be in a relationship together, but it just depends on the Aspies. I mean, some are not going to work out well together, but same is true for neurotypicals. Some neurotypicals are not meant to be together. So yeah, absolutely. And you also said that some of the traits for girls seem opposite to those for males, and not really opposite, but the main one of the main differences for females on the spectrum and men is that women in general come into the world with a different set of social skill. Females are the one we give birth to young, and so genetically we are programmed to have a different degree of connectivity, of being more emotionally aware, and to some degree more aware of the nonverbal cues. Now, that's not to say that women on the spectrum can't still really struggle with these things, but for example, women, the mother, when babies, there's no language. There's no language when a baby comes out, and so we have to know how to recognize the cries and the before language exists. And so some of that's more hardwired into women, just the social interaction. So in that regard, women and men tend to have some differences there, but I wouldn't call them opposites. Just different sets of baseline skills, if that makes sense. Okay, so this person asked another question, said, in one of your Facebook posts, you talked about 3 keys to a successful marriage, whether or not a couple will actually work out or be able to fix their relationship. And yes, that's ability, willingness, and motivation. I just mentioned it earlier today too. She said, I think my husband has the willingness and sometimes the motivation, but as a person with Asperger's, does he have the ability? And moreover, does he have the ability to parent? We have 3 small children, and it seems to be all too much for him. Okay. Ability is very unique to the individual. So I can't really say. Can some folks with Asperger's have relationships? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's why I do this for a living. I believe in neurodiverse relationships. I see them working, but it really is unique to each individual. I have met folks on the spectrum who really don't have the ability to connect to other people in a way that is relational and that is really required to have a relationship. Now, you're married, it looks like, and have 3 children. So that has been there to some degree so far. You got as far as dating and courting and marriage and having children. So he has some degree of ability to be in a relationship. Um, the ability to parent, that varies as well, and it depends on our definition of parenting. Um, some folks on the spectrum are more capable of recognizing what children need, of safety awareness. Safety awareness can be a struggle for some folks on the spectrum, um, of emotional responsiveness and receptivity. It just really depends on your husband. And when you say it seems to be too much for him, there may be overwhelm that's happening. 3 small children is overwhelming. I have 2 children. I am neurotypical, and I was very overwhelmed, but I managed. Um, some folks on the spectrum really, it's an overload and they get flooded. So it's important to figure out what is happening. Why? When you say, um, it seems to be too much for him, that needs to be broken down into what specifically is too much for him and why, so that you can address the specific parts of parenting that he's struggling with. It can be the sound, it can be the smell, it can be lots of things. And so if you can address those specific things and make adjustments, then he may be a very good parent. All right, let's see what you guys are saying. Eggman saying you're a fantastic chef, but make sequencing errors, and that can be a problem in cooking. McKenna, you're saying I think Aspie, women and men are actually more in tune with the unspoken aspects of relationships. Yes, I would agree with that too. The nonverbals, sometimes they can actually, well, so a lot of folks on the spectrum really struggle with the nonverbals, but in terms of actually recognizing those nonverbals. But when you neurotypicals are very verbal usually, and so when you have 2 neurodiverse people together and the language is not as big of a factor in the relationship, because there is communication happening, but both partners aren't looking to spoken language to be the primary way of communicating, it can actually work. So I hope I said that in a way that makes sense. So I'm agreeing with you there. And I'm so glad I give you hope, Eggman. I'm looking forward to your journey. And I messaged you that if you want some private coaching, book an appointment with me. We're musicians in our family too, by the way. We don't teach music, but my daughter got a voice scholarship. She's starting college this fall. Nathan says, yes, definitely the wife has better social skills and more friends. She's also more black and white. Yeah. So there again, that's how neurodiversity has a different look with every single individual, but the common thread is that neurodiversity exists. But you're also saying that could be your opinion. I would love to hear your wife's opinion. Get her on here sometime. McKenna says, let's see, I come away from these sessions not feeling so alone. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that, because that's why I do this, you guys. I want you guys to understand and to realize you aren't alone. There's so many people in the world who are experiencing such similar things. And that I loved hearing that from you. Okay. Ability is hard to spot. My Aspie husband has always been good with kids before we had our own. So caring for our own kids is so different. My husband got overloaded with stimuli for caring. Yes, because when you're caring for somebody else's kids, you can send them home. But when it's your own kids, it doesn't go away. They're throwing up in the middle of the night, and they're crying, and they need to be fed every day. And yeah, it definitely becomes more overwhelming. Um, Nathan's saying, "Can your husband make lists or otherwise compensate?" Say, "Can all right, I do have. Beverly says, "Thank you. My husband is an extroverted Aspie." Yes. So a lot of people believe that Aspies are all introverts. And I will say the vast majority that I have met, and I think that's well over 1,000 now, are introverted. But I have definitely met folks on the spectrum that are social introverts. So they do really enjoy socializing. My daughter is actually one of them. She's an introvert. She has to have her downtime to power up, recharge her battery, but she really loves hanging out with her friends. She actually loves hanging out with us. She's very social in that regard, and the quarantine was so hard on her because she was isolated from everybody. Uh, Thank you about my daughter, Eggman. Yeah, I'm excited for her. Okay, you guys, I have one more question that was emailed in. So this will be the last question for today. And if you have a question, please just send it to my email and I'll put it on the docket for next week. So this last question, she says it's about masking. This is a topic that comes up a lot. And it says, "It seems my husband's ability, willingness, motivation, you guys are paying attention to me. I love it. She says, I'm not sure which word is correct. So his ability, willingness, and motivation to mask is less and less over the years. So this is similar actually to the first question. I understand that masking is probably exhausting for him, but when we are alone together or just with our kids who are 11 and 10, his regular unmasked behavior is exhausting to me. We've been together for 19 years, married for 16. In the past, it's like we've moved into a business partnership style relationship. I'm pretty sure my body is feeling the effects of chronic stress. And although I'm keen to keep working on improving our relationship, I'm wondering if I have the stamina for it. When we're with other people, he obviously masks and it's so much easier to be with, but our conversations are shallow, fake, superficial in these situations. How can I learn to deal better with his masking when he's not masking, and when he's not masking, really learn how to dive deep into a serious conversation? It's like I'm dealing with two different people." And this person went on to say she's already done the communication step 3, which is I used to call this my self-study course. It's now called the 4-stage communication hack. And she's wondering about going through it again or getting in private coaching. So let's talk about this. She's saying how they've got kids who are 11 and 10. They've been married for 19 or together for 19 years, and their relationship just feels like it's just superficial. He drops the mask when it's just them. So first of all, I want to just say, okay, I hear your despair and your hopelessness and your frustration with that, and it is discouraging. But I also want to say that part of what you're experiencing is a normal part of the process of marriage and raising children. So some of this has to do with being in a neurodiverse relationship because the overwhelm can be greater for both of you when you're in a neurodiverse relationship because you're not speaking that same language. Your communication is probably strained. You guys have been through the communication program, so you've learned a lot about how to clarify that communication. That's huge. But you still are neurodiverse. So, you don't think and process the world the same. But the other piece of this is that raising kids is exhausting. The one thing that I learned, that one of the number one things I learned about my life when I had children is that I am not in control. I cannot control anything. I can plan. I can plan ahead and I can have a strategy. But I had 2 special needs children. One has Asperger's, the other one has sensory processing disorder and had epilepsy for like 10 years. And it's overwhelming and exhausting. And those of you who have neurodiverse partners, if you've had children with them, there's a very high likelihood that your children are either ADD, have sensory processing issues, or autistic too. So it's exhausting. So what I want to say is this is a stage. Raising children, it's kind of like running I'm not a runner, but it's kind of like being, I told you I started working out. There's a when you're working out or you're doing something that's a really hard project and there's a miserable part of it, but you know that you can get to the end. The middle is the hardest because that's when you've started, but the finish line is still way ahead of you, and it's the hardest part. So raising middle schoolers, 10 and 11 years old, is part of the hardest part of raising children. You're going to be exhausted. And your relationship as a couple is that's going to be some of the toughest years. So what I want you to really focus on right now is really fine tuning that communication. Maybe take a look at your expectations for your relationship. It's not that you don't need to expect to have a connected, close relationship, but also realize that during this stage of parenting and a relationship, it's just going to be exhausting. And whatever those expectations are for what a connected relationship should look like, take a look at that and ask yourself how much is necessary. How much do you really, what's the baseline? What do you really need to feel okay in this relationship? Not great, wonderful, it's awesome, it's the best, but I'm okay and I can do this. Because the thing is, if you can really solidify those skills that you've learned in the communication program, you've got a foundation to build on once the kids get older. Because once they start to get older and they become more independent, then the two of you start to be a couple again. And what I see is two things happening. One, I call it the commitment divorce. This happens around 19 years. You guys are at the 19-year mark. Well, you've been married for 16. 19, 20 years when the kids get a little bit older. Couples who have just been together because they're committed to the relationship, but they didn't work on the communication and staying connected, that's when the relationship ends. I can't tell you how many marriages end at year 19. It is a deadly year when marriages end. But if you work on that communication foundation and you stay connected through at least communicating, even though you're both exhausted all the time, the demands that your children are placing on each of you as individuals and as a couple will start to reduce over time. And then you'll have this communication foundation that you will then start growing back together as a couple. It's like you grow out and then you grow back in together as a couple. So you guys keep it. You're both obviously, you said you're not sure about his ability, his willingness, and his motivation, but he's done the communication program. That shows me some willingness and some motivation. And yeah, it's going to change some, from day to day, our motivation. All right, let's see what you guys are saying over here. Eggman saying I communicate through affection, not words. Yeah, so there's the language thing. Language is not the first way of communicating for most folks on the spectrum. It's not your native language, spoken word. Wendy says 11 and 10 is a hard age. Yeah, the hormones, that's when it starts, you guys, the hormones. And kids are so hard to raise through the middle school years. So Eggman teaches the middle schoolers. Yeah, fun times. Oh, my hat's off to you. God bless you. And McKenna's saying the middle, that's probably the hardest part of marriage too. Yeah, the middle. And the middle, it is. The beginning is easier. The middle is when we're raising those kids, and career stuff changes sometimes. We're dealing with our own hormonal changes and bodily changes. If we can really, really get that foundation of communication, because the way you communicate determines the narrative you have about your partner and about your relationship. And if that narrative over time becomes very toxic and antagonistic, a lot of you, when you come to me for private coaching, it's like you have boxing gloves on and you're in a boxing ring, and you are not on the same, you're against each other. You're not on the same team. And so when we're in the middle, we have to get you on the same team, so that it's you and your partner against the world, against life, not you against life and your partner. So guys, if you haven't, I mean, this person has already been through up through stage 3 of my 5-step communication program. If you haven't gotten started in this, it's so easy. It's the first step is free. The second step is just $25. And then the third step is where the real transformation starts to happen, and it's $225. And then the coaching group is $500. So really for $800, you guys, a lot of you won't end up having a divorce. And I'm just here to say $800 is a whole lot cheaper than a divorce. So please get into that program if you haven't looked into it. And again, the first step's free. Just go to the website, spectrumrelationships.com, and crack the communication code as a tab at the top. All right. And by the Eggman, you're single, but this would still be a good program for you to try, because you're dating, and it help you learn how to communicate in those dating relationships. All right, you guys, this has been a great live today. Thank you everybody for showing up. Don't forget, if you want to get on a call with me, and if you're ready to try private coaching, my calendar, I've got more space on my calendar for that now. I'm excited to start working with more of you. So just go get yourself on a consultation and let's get started. Otherwise, I will see you guys next week. Thank you guys for being here.